The warning came without ceremony. Every screen across 17 human star systems lit up at the same moment. Every radio frequency carried the same message. Every communication device, from the oldest colony stations to the newest personal tablets, displayed the same alien face. The creature on the screens had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its skin looked like polished obsidian, reflecting the cold light of distant stars. When it spoke, translation algorithms worked frantically to convert the harsh sounds into something humans could understand. I am Warlord Krethix of the Valkyrie Dominion. Your species has 6 hours to surrender. Transmit your acceptance on all frequencies. Prepare your leaders for processing. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your homeworld and all colony systems. We have conquered 43 civilizations. You are simply the next. The transmission ended. Silence fell across human space like a physical weight. On Unity Prime, the massive orbital station circling Earth, Supreme Commander Taeyang stood in the command center and watched the tactical display. 3,000 red dots hung in space beyond Neptune's orbit. Each dot represented a Valkyrie warship. The computer kept running analysis, trying to categorize the vessels by size and probable weapons capacity. The numbers it generated were not encouraging. Taeyang was a thin man with gray hair and careful eyes. He had commanded the Solar Defense Fleet for 12 years. He had fought pirates, settled territorial disputes with corporate mining operations, and once faced down a rogue AI that had taken control of a weapons platform near Mars. None of that had prepared him for this. "Get me President Minji," he said quietly. "Emergency protocols. Full council." The officer at the communications station nodded, her hands shaking slightly as she entered the codes. 30 minutes later, Taeyang stood in a virtual conference room. The holographic projections made it seem like everyone was present in the same space, though in reality they were scattered across Earth and the inner colonies. President Minji sat at the head of the table, her face composed but her knuckles white where she gripped the armrests of her chair. "Analysis," she said simply. Admiral Hyun-woo spoke first. He was a big man with a scarred face and a reputation for blunt honesty. "We have 412 combat-ready vessels in the Solar Defense Fleet. Maybe another 100 civilian ships we could retrofit with weapons if we had a few weeks. The Valkyrie brought 3,000 warships. Our best intelligence says each of their ships outguns our equivalent class by a factor of 3 to 1. So we're looking at roughly 20 to 1 odds," said Governor Kwon from the Mars colony. "What about allies? The Centauri Trade Consortium? They've already recalled their ships to their home systems," Taeyang said. The message was clear. Everyone's pulling back, hoping the Valkyrie won't notice them if they stay quiet. "Cowards," muttered General Bora from the moon base. "Pragmatists," Minji corrected softly. They saw what happened to the Xian Empire. 40 billion people across 12 worlds. The Valkyrie took 3 weeks to break them completely. That was 5 years ago. The survivors are still working in Valkyrie mining operations. The room fell silent. Everyone had seen the intelligence reports. The Valkyrie didn't negotiate. They didn't compromise. They gave an ultimatum and, then, they followed through with absolute precision. "Begin evacuation protocols," said Minister Dae-hoon, who oversaw civilian infrastructure. "Focus on children and essential personnel. We can get maybe 10 million off-world before the deadline if we start now." 10 million out of 8 billion, Taeyang said. "And evacuate them where? The colonies can't support that kind of influx." And the Valkyrie said all human systems. "Running just means dying somewhere else." Minji raised her hand for silence. "Does anyone have any option other than surrender or suicide?" The silence stretched for nearly a minute. These were the smartest, most experienced leaders humanity had. And none of them had an answer. Then, Colonel Jaiwan spoke for the first time. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. She ran special weapons development, a department most people found incredibly boring. Experimental propulsion systems, shield harmonics, sensor improvements. Important work, but not the kind that won wars. I need to speak with President Minji privately, Jaiwan said. Immediately. Taeyong frowned. Colonel, we don't have time for, now, Jaiwan interrupted, and, something in her voice made everyone stop. This cannot wait. And, it cannot be discussed in this forum. Minji studied the colonel's face for a long moment. Then, she nodded. Everyone else, begin preparations for both scenarios. Evacuation and surrender protocols. We reconvene in 1 hour. She paused. And, someone start drafting a message to Warlord Krethix. See if we can buy more time. The conference dissolved. The holograms vanished, leaving only Minji and Jaiwan. This better be important, Minji said. Project Nightfall, Jaiwan said simply. The president's face went blank. Then, her eyes widened slightly. That's still just theoretical research. Computer models and simulations. No ma'am, Jaiwan said. It's been operational for 9 years. Fully tested. We've just been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. 9 years? Minji felt her stomach drop. I've been president for 6 years. Are you telling me there's been a weapons program I didn't know about? Only 12 people know, Jaiwan said. Your predecessor authorized it after the Proxima incident. We found something out there, ma'am. Something old. Something powerful. We learned how to use it. Use what? Jaiwan pulled up a holographic display. It showed schematics that looked more like physics diagrams than weapons blueprints. Equations that hurt to look at. Probability fields that seemed to fold in on themselves. The short version. We can manipulate spacetime at the quantum level. We can create localized areas where the laws of physics become very flexible. Very controllable. English, Colonel. We can make things stop existing, ma'am. Just, remove them from reality. Ships, weapons, entire fleets. And, the Valkyrie won't know it's coming until it's already happened. Minji sat down heavily. How sure are you this works? We've tested it on asteroids, on derelict ships, on targets ranging from 1 meter to 1 kilometer. The math scales up. 3,000 ships is well within operational parameters. Casualties? Collateral damage? None. The effect is perfectly contained. We can target specific vessels and leave everything else untouched. It's the most precise weapon ever created. Minji looked at the display, at the impossible equations, at the promise of salvation wrapped in science she couldn't begin to understand. Why wasn't I told? Because the last president decided that this weapon was too dangerous to use. It was built purely as a deterrent. Something hidden, something that would only activate if humanity faced extinction. You were kept in the dark because if you didn't know, you couldn't be forced to reveal it. And, now? Now the Valkyrie have given us 6 hours to surrender, Jaiwan said. This is exactly the scenario Project Nightfall was designed for. Minji closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. Warlord Krethix stood on the bridge of the Eternal Conquest and felt satisfied. The flagship was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Around it, the Valkyrie Armada hung in perfect formation, a display of power that had broken the will of dozens of civilizations. Analysis of human military capacity, he ordered. His tactical officer, a younger Valkyrie named Drethix, pulled up the holographic displays. 417 combat vessels detected. Approximately 70% are destroyer class or smaller. Their largest dreadnoughts mass only half of our equivalent ships. Weapons technology appears to be standard kinetic accelerators and basic energy weapons. Shield technology is at least 2 generations behind our own. Estimated time to total victory. If they resist, 14 minutes from Earth orbit to complete planetary suppression. Another 6 hours to secure the outer colonies. Krethix's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction. They have already been given 6 hours to surrender. They will not resist. Humans are like all prey species. They make threats when safe, but fold when faced with real danger. He settled into his command chair and waited. This was the part he enjoyed most. The waiting. The knowledge that somewhere on that blue world ahead, leaders were arguing, people were panicking, and the inevitable conclusion was slowly crushing their spirits. On Unity Prime, Admiral Hyun-woo was making the performance of his career. He barked orders across open communication channels he knew the Valkyrie were monitoring. His voice carried just the right amount of controlled panic. Move the 7th Fleet to Mars' defensive perimeter. Get those civilian transports away from Earth now. I want every available ship between the Valkyrie and our homeworld. The Solar Defense Fleet began deploying invisible formations. Ships moved into standard defensive positions around Earth and Mars. On the surface, it looked like humanity was preparing for a desperate last stand. The formations were textbook, predictable, exactly what a competent but outmatched military would do. What the Valkyrie sensors couldn't detect were the 43 stealth ships positioned throughout the solar system. Each one was smaller than a standard fighter, coated in materials that absorbed every kind of scanning beam the Valkyrie possessed. They had been built in hidden shipyards, assembled in deep space where no one would stumble across them by accident. Captain Youngmi commanded one of those ships. The shadow of Terra sat in Saturn's rings, powered down to minimal systems, practically invisible among the ice and rock. She and her crew of 8 had been stationed here for 3 months, waiting. Training. Preparing for a moment they all hoped would never come. Status, she whispered, though there was no need for quiet in the vacuum of space. All systems green, her tactical officer replied. Quantum field generator is charged and ready. We're receiving encrypted signals from the other vessels. Everyone's in position. Youngmi nodded. Across the solar system, 42 other captains were doing exactly the same thing. Checking systems. Waiting for the signal. Hoping their families on Earth would never know what they were about to do. Deep beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Soo-hyun walked through a facility that didn't exist on any official map. The chamber was massive, carved from solid rock and lined with equipment that looked more like art than science. Curved surfaces that seemed to bend light. Crystalline structures that hummed with power. Screens displaying mathematics that had taken humanity's best minds 12 years to even partially understand. 300 researchers worked here. Most of them had families who thought they did boring administrative work for the Space Science Foundation. They had spent years of their lives studying technology that came from something not human. Something very old. Something that had drifted dead and silent near Proxima Centauri until a survey ship stumbled across it. The derelict had been small, barely 30 meters long. It had been dead for thousands of years, maybe longer. The hull was made of materials that existed in a state between solid matter and energy. The interior contained no crew, no bodies, no clues about who built it. Just one thing, a device that manipulated the fundamental fabric of reality itself. Humanity didn't understand it. Not really. But, they had learned how to activate it. How to control it. How to weaponize it. Begin the initialization sequence, Soo-hyun ordered. Slow and careful. We only get one chance at this. The facility hummed to life. Power readings spiked across every monitor. The quantum field generators, hidden in 17 locations across human space, began their activation cycle. It would take 90 minutes to bring them fully online. The timing had to be perfect. On Earth, President Minji opened a communication channel to the Valkyrie flagship. She made sure her face showed the right amount of strain, the right amount of fear. She was about to lie to a warlord who had conquered 43 civilizations, and she needed to be convincing. Krethix's image appeared on her screen. His 4 eyes studied her with something like amusement. I am President Minji of the United Human Systems. I'm requesting a 12-hour extension to your deadline. We need time to properly organize the surrender protocols, to make sure. 4 hours, Krethix interrupted. You now have 4 hours. I have reduced your time because you attempted to negotiate. Do not contact me again unless it is to signal your complete and unconditional surrender. The channel closed. Minji allowed herself a small smile. Krethix thought he was demonstrating dominance by reducing the deadline. In reality, he had just given her exactly what she needed. 4 hours was more than enough time. She opened a new channel to Colonel Jaiwan. He took the bait. How long until nightfall is ready? 2 hours and 40 minutes. We'll be fully operational with plenty of time to spare. And, if he decides to attack early? Jaiwan's expression didn't change. Then, we activate with partial power. It won't be as clean, but it will still work. Either way, ma'am, this ends today. Throughout human space, people prepared for the end. Evacuation ships launched from major colonies, though there was nowhere safe to run. Parents held their children. Lovers made promises they knew they couldn't keep. Prayers were said in 100 languages to 1,000 different gods. None of them knew that beneath the moon, a weapon beyond their comprehension was warming up. None of them knew that 43 stealth ships were positioned perfectly throughout the solar system. None of them knew that their military, which appeared to be preparing for a hopeless defensive stand, was actually the bait in a trap that had been 15 years in the making. Commander Dohayan sat in a facility beneath the ice of Europa. His console displayed the positions of every quantum field generator in the network. Green lights were slowly appearing as each one came online. The system was distributed across human space precisely so that no single attack could disable it. You would have to destroy 17 different installations simultaneously, and no one except the 12 people who knew about Project Nightfall even knew where those installations were. Sir, we have a problem, his second officer said. Valkyrie fleet is beginning to advance. They're not waiting for the deadline. Dohayan checked his chronometer. Still 90 minutes until the deadline. Still 45 minutes until nightfall would be fully operational. Contact Colonel Jaiwan. Tell her we might need to activate early. The Valkyrie armada began moving forward. Not at attack speed yet, just a slow advance. A demonstration of power. A reminder that the deadline was a courtesy, not a requirement. 3,000 warships began their approach toward Earth. Each one carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they represented the accumulated military might of an empire that had crushed 43 civilizations. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Warlord Krethix watched the human defensive formations and felt contempt. They were scattered, poorly coordinated, obviously desperate. This would be easier than he expected. What he didn't see were the invisible ships. What he didn't detect was the network of quantum generators coming online across the solar system. What he didn't understand was that humanity's apparent weakness was the most dangerous deception they had ever attempted. The trap was almost ready. The prey had bared their teeth. And, in less than an hour, the Valkyrie Dominion was about to learn that sometimes, the species that looks weakest is actually the one you should fear most. With 30 minutes left until the deadline, Warlord Krethix decided to deliver his final message to humanity. He believed in breaking spirits before breaking bodies. It was cleaner that way. More efficient. He opened a transmission on every human frequency, ensuring that every man, woman, and child in all 17 star systems would hear his words. Humans of the United Systems, I am Warlord Krethix. Your time is nearly over. Since you have failed to respond with surrender, I will now explain what comes next. Your leaders will be processed and evaluated. Those with useful knowledge will be taken to Valkyrie educational facilities where they will teach us everything they know. This process typically takes several years and has a 94% mortality rate. He paused, letting that sink in. Your scientists and engineers will be conscripted into Valkyrie research divisions. You will work until you are no longer useful. Your world, Earth, will become a resource extraction operation. The oceans contain minerals we require. The crust will be mined to a depth of 50 kilometers. Your remaining population will operate the machinery. On Earth, in homes and shelters across the planet, people listened in horror. Your colonies will be dismantled. Useful infrastructure will be claimed. Useless structures will be destroyed. You have 30 minutes to accept these terms peacefully. If you resist, we will demonstrate why 43 civilizations chose submission over destruction. End transmission. The screens went dark. The silence that followed was the silence of a species staring into the abyss. But, in the hidden facility beneath the moon, Dr. Soo-hyun smiled. Arrogant, she muttered. They're so certain of victory they're not even being careful. Her assistant, a young physicist named Hanul, checked the final calculations. All 17 generators are now at full power. The quantum field network is stable. We're ready to activate on your command. Soo-hyun opened a channel to President Minji. Nightfall is operational, ma'am. We can fire at any time. Minji sat in a presidential bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth. Around her, military advisors monitored displays showing the Valkyrie fleet's approach. The alien ships were moving faster now, closing the distance. They would reach Earth orbit in 14 minutes. The deadline would expire in 28. Colonel Jaiwan, Minji said. Final confirmation. This will work. Jaiwan stood in Unity Prime's command center next to Supreme Commander Taeyang. She pulled up the tactical display, showing the position of every Valkyrie ship overlaid with the invisible quantum field network. The system creates localized areas of unstable spacetime. Everything within those areas experiences severe quantum decoherence. Matter stops being matter in any meaningful sense. The effect is instant and completely contained. No radiation, no explosion, no debris field. The targets simply cease to exist in this dimensional space. In simple terms. Minji pressed. They vanish, ma'am. Completely and permanently. Taeyang spoke up. And we're certain there's no way they can detect this before it activates? Impossible, Soo-hyun said over the channel. The quantum fields exist in a state that's undetectable until the moment of activation. It's like asking if they can see something that doesn't exist yet. The technology is based on principles they don't understand. We barely understand it ourselves. Minji took a deep breath. 3,000 ships. Probably millions of alien crew members. She was about to give an order that would kill them all. There was no other choice. Surrender meant slavery, resistance meant extinction. But, the weight of it still settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. Lieutenant Yunji, she said. You are authorized to activate Project Nightfall when the Valkyrie flagship crosses Jupiter's orbit. Execute on your discretion. On Unity Prime, Lieutenant Yunji sat at the fire control station. She was 26 years old. She had a daughter named Sumi who was 5 years old and loved drawing pictures of spaceships. Yunji had joined the military to make the universe safer for children like Sumi. Now she was about to kill more beings than any human in history. Her hand moved to the activation console. A simple biometric scanner. A code that only she and 11 other people knew. Once she entered it, the quantum field generators would activate simultaneously across all 17 facilities. The network would engage. And the Valkyrie Armada would cease to exist. "Ma'am," she said quietly to Colonel Jaiwan. "Requesting confirmation of targets." "All Valkyrie vessels displaying military configuration," Jaiwan replied. 3,047 ships. "We'll leave a few in quantum stasis rather than complete deletion. We'll need proof this happened." The Valkyrie fleet crossed Jupiter's orbit. Sensor displays showed them accelerating to attack speed. Weapons systems were charging. In minutes, they would begin bombardment of human positions. Yunji thought of her daughter. She thought of every child on Earth. Every family on Mars, on Europa, on Titan, on all the colonies scattered across human space. She thought of 43 civilizations that had surrendered and spent generations as slaves. She entered the code. Deep beneath the moon, the quantum field generators reached peak power. Energy readings spiked to levels that would have destroyed any conventional weapon. The ancient technology, recovered from a dead ship thousands of years old, came fully alive for the first time since humanity found it. Across the solar system, 17 facilities activated simultaneously. The quantum fields they generated were invisible, intangible, undetectable. They existed in mathematical space, in probability states that conventional physics couldn't measure. Those fields expanded outward at the speed of light, following carefully calculated vectors. They passed through normal matter like it wasn't there. Planets, asteroids, human ships, all were completely unaffected. The fields were tuned to one specific target set. Valkyrie warships. Captain Youngmi watched from the shadow of Terra as the invisible wave passed through Saturn's rings. Her sensors couldn't detect it. No instrument humanity possessed could measure it directly. But the effect was unmistakable. The red dots on her tactical display began vanishing. Not explosions. Not debris. Just there one moment, gone the next. 3,047 red dots. They disappeared in less than 5 seconds. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Warlord Krethik saw his tactical display start showing errors. Ships were disappearing from sensors. Dozens of them. Hundreds. His 4 eyes widened in disbelief. "What is happening?" he roared. "Drethix, report." His tactical officer's hands flew over the controls, trying to make sense of impossible data. "They're gone, my lord. Not destroyed, not damaged. They're simply not there anymore. I'm reading quantum fluctuations but nothing that should." Drethix stopped speaking. Stopped moving. Stopped existing. Krethix turned and saw that his entire bridge crew had vanished. The consoles they had been operating were empty. No bodies, no blood, no sign they had ever been there. Just empty chairs and silent screens. He tried to move and found that he couldn't. His body was frozen in place. Time around him seemed to slow, to thicken like liquid. He could still see, still think, but he couldn't act. Couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything except watch as his flagship became a tomb of one. The quantum stasis field had him. He would stay this way, trapped between one moment and the next, until someone decided to release him. Or forever. Whichever came first. Across the solar system, the same scene played out on 94 other Valkyrie ships. The crews vanished, the commanders frozen in time. Evidence preserved in quantum amber. The remaining ships of the Armada simply ceased to exist. 2,953 warships, each carrying between 200 and 5,000 crew members. All of them removed from this dimension in less time than it took to draw a breath. On Unity Prime, Admiral Hyunwoo stared at his tactical display in silence. The space beyond Jupiter's orbit, which moments ago had been filled with enemy contacts, was now empty. Completely empty. The only red dots remaining were the 94 ships in stasis, frozen and harmless. "Confirmation," he said hoarsely. "All units report." Reports came in from across the solar system. The solar defense fleet was intact. Every human ship, every station, every colony reported 0 damage, 0 casualties. They had been untouched by the quantum fields. The Valkyrie invasion fleet had been neutralized. The war was over. It had taken 5 minutes from activation to completion. Supreme Commander Taeyong sat down heavily in his chair. He had commanded fleets in battle before. He had seen ships destroyed, crews lost, the terrible cost of war. But, he had never seen anything like this. An entire armada, gone in minutes, without firing a shot. Lieutenant Yunji was crying silently at her station. Colonel Jaiwan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved humanity," Jaiwan said quietly. "Your daughter will grow up free because of what you just did." "How many?" Yunji whispered. "How many did we just kill?" The computer calculated the answer. "Approximately 8,400,000 Valkyrie crew members. Gone in 5 minutes." In the presidential bunker, Minji closed her eyes. They had won. Humanity would survive. But, the price of that victory would haunt her for the rest of her life. Outside, across Earth and all the colonies, people waited for news. They didn't know yet that the war was over. They didn't know that the nightmare had ended almost before it began. They were about to find out. President Minji stood before the cameras in the presidential bunker. Her hands were steady but, her eyes showed the weight of what she was about to say. Every screen across human space would show this broadcast. And, if Colonel Jaiwan had done her job correctly, every screen in Valkyrie space would show it too. "People of humanity," she began. 37 minutes ago, the Valkyrie Dominion gave us an ultimatum. Surrender or die. They brought 3,000 warships to enforce that demand. They have conquered 43 civilizations. They believed we would be the 44th. She paused, gathering her thoughts. They were wrong. The Valkyrie invasion fleet has been neutralized. Every ship has been disabled or destroyed. There were no human casualties. Not one. Our worlds are safe. The war is over. Across Earth, in shelters and homes and gathering places, people stared at their screens in stunned silence. Some began crying. Others started cheering. Most simply couldn't process what they were hearing. "But, I owe you the truth," Minji continued. "What happened today was not a conventional military victory. For 15 years, in secret, humanity has possessed a weapon of unprecedented power. It was developed from technology we found on an ancient alien derelict. We barely understand it. We certainly didn't create it. But, we learned to use it." She pulled up images of the quantum field generators, the hidden facilities, the stealth ships. Project Nightfall was authorized under my predecessor. Only 12 people in the government knew it existed. I was not one of them until today. This weapon was kept secret because it was built solely as a last resort. A deterrent that would only be revealed if humanity faced extinction. Today, we faced extinction. Today, we used it. On Mars, Governor Kwan watched the broadcast with growing understanding. The scattered defensive formations. The apparent panic. It had all been theater. A performance designed to make the Valkyrie underestimate human capability. The quantum field technology allows us to manipulate spacetime itself, Minji explained. It can remove objects from this dimension. Make them simply cease to exist. It's instant, precise, and leaves no trace. It worked exactly as designed. The Valkyrie fleet is gone. She took a deep breath. This means we killed approximately 8,400,000 Valkyrie crew members. In 5 minutes. I authorized this action. I gave the order. The responsibility is mine. I tell you this because you deserve to know the truth about how your safety was purchased. The weight of that number settled over humanity like a shroud. 8 million lives. Ended in less time than it took to drink a cup of coffee. To the Valkyrie Dominion, Minji said, her voice hardening. You are watching this transmission. Your invasion fleet is gone. Your warlord is alive but, imprisoned in quantum stasis. We have preserved 94 of your ships in the same state as proof of what happened here. You gave us hours to fall. We ended your war in minutes. She leaned toward the camera. We did not want this. We would have preferred peace. But, you came to our home with demands of slavery and, threats of genocide. You left us no choice. Know this, the weapon that destroyed your fleet is purely defensive. It requires weeks to position properly. We cannot take it to your worlds. We cannot use it to invade. It exists only to protect human space. Colonel Jaiwan had insisted on including that detail. If the Valkyrie thought humanity could deploy this weapon offensively, they might launch a desperate counterattack with everything they had. Better to let them know the truth. Project Nightfall was a shield, not a sword. But, also know this, Minji continued. We will use it again if we must. Any force that enters human space with hostile intent will face the same fate as your invasion fleet. We have hidden this technology for 15 years. We can hide it for 1500. You will never know where the generators are positioned. You will never detect them before they activate. And, if you attack us again, you will simply cease to exist. She stood up. We are transmitting the coordinates of one of your ships that we are releasing from stasis. The destroyer Razorwind. Its crew is unharmed. They will tell you what they witnessed. They will confirm that everything I have said is true. Take your ship. Take your survivors. And, never return to human space. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, humanity began to understand what had happened. They had been saved by a weapon they didn't know existed. A secret that had been kept for their own protection. Power beyond imagination, wielded for 5 minutes, just once, to end a war before it could truly begin. 3 hours later, Dr. Soo-hyun met with the Emergency Council in a secure virtual conference. The 12 people who knew about Project Nightfall were now joined by the full government leadership. Secrets were no longer necessary. Explain how this weapon works, demanded General Bora. In terms we can understand. Soo-hyun pulled up a holographic display. Normal matter exists in what we call dimensional space. It has properties like mass, position, velocity. The quantum field generators create zones where those properties become unstable. Matter within those zones is pushed into a different dimensional state. It's not destroyed in the conventional sense. It's just not here anymore. Where does it go? Asked Governor Kwan. We don't know. The mathematics suggests it might exist in a parallel dimensional space, or it might be dispersed across infinite probability states. The original builders of this technology might have understood. We don't. We just learned to make it happen. And, the ships in stasis? Taeyong asked. Those are frozen in temporal suspension. Time hasn't stopped for them, it's just moving so slowly that 1,000 years will pass before they experience 1 second. We can release them whenever we choose. Or we can leave them frozen forever. Admiral Hyun-woo spoke up. Can other species develop this technology? Should we expect the Valkyrie to try to recreate it? Unlikely, Soo-hyun said. This isn't something you can reverse engineer from observing the effects. The theoretical physics required are so advanced that we barely understand them, and we had the original device to study. Starting from scratch would take centuries of research. Maybe longer. So we have a monopoly on dimensional weapons, Minister Daehoon said slowly. That makes us the most powerful military force in known space. Only defensively, Colonel Jaiwon corrected. I cannot stress this enough. Project Nightfall requires extensive preparation. We spent years positioning the generators throughout the solar system. If we wanted to protect another star system, we'd need months or years to set up the infrastructure. This isn't a weapon we can point at someone across the galaxy. It's a barrier we can build around our own territory. President Minji had been listening quietly. Now she spoke. What you're saying is that we're safe in our own space, but we can't project this power outward. Correct, Jaiwon confirmed. The ancient technology is defensive by nature. Maybe that's why whoever built it is gone. Maybe they had the ultimate shield but no sword, and someone found a way around it. The room fell silent as everyone considered that disturbing possibility. For now, Minji said finally, we maintain the network. We keep the generators active and hidden. We begin training more personnel so that the knowledge doesn't rest with just a handful of people. And we make it very clear to the galaxy that human space is now untouchable. What about the Valkyrie? Taeyong asked. Will they accept this? Or will they try something else? As if in answer, an alert chimed. A communication request from deep space. The source was identified as the Valkyrie Dominion Central Command. That was fast, Hyun-woo muttered. Minji nodded to the communications officer. Accept it. The holographic display shifted, showing a Valkyrie different from Warlord Krethix. This one was older, with decorative markings along its obsidian skin. Its 4 eyes were calculating rather than arrogant. I am Emissary Vector of the Valkyrie Dominion. I speak with the authority of the High Council. We have received your transmission and verified its contents through our recovered ship. We acknowledge the loss of our invasion fleet. The emissary paused, and, when it spoke again, something had changed in its tone. Something that might have been respect, or fear, or both. The Valkyrie Dominion seeks to open negotiations. Not for your surrender. For an armistice. We formally request diplomatic discussions regarding the establishment of peaceful relations between our peoples. Minji allowed herself a small smile. The species that had conquered 43 civilizations was asking for peace. Not demanding it. Asking. We will consider your request, she said. But, understand this, Emissary Vector. If any Valkyrie ship enters human space without explicit permission, it will be considered an act of war. And you now know exactly what that means. Understood, Vector said. We will await your terms. The transmission ended. The emergency council sat in stunned silence. They had not just survived. They had won. Completely. Decisively. In a way that made future wars seem almost impossible. So, Taeyong said eventually. What do we do now? Minji stood up. Now we figure out how to live in a galaxy that's suddenly afraid of us. And we make sure we never become the kind of civilization that uses this power for anything other than defense. Outside, across human space, people celebrated their survival. They didn't yet understand the full implications of what had happened. They would, in time. They would learn that humanity now possessed the ultimate defensive weapon. That they were safe in a way no other civilization in the galaxy could claim to be. They would also learn the burden that came with that safety. The knowledge of what their weapon could do. The responsibility to never abuse it. The isolation that comes from being feared by everyone else in the galaxy. But, for now, they celebrated. They had been given hours to fall. They had ended the war in minutes. And they had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 6 months after the Valkyrie invasion ended in 5 minutes, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. Trade routes shifted. Diplomatic relationships reformed. Species that had never spoken to humanity before sent careful messages asking about peaceful contact. Everyone wanted to know more about the civilization that had destroyed the Valkyrie fleet without firing a single conventional weapon. Colonel Jaiwan stood in the command center beneath the moon and watched as workers began the delicate process of decommissioning half of the Nightfall installations. President Minji had made the decision after long consultation with the Emergency Council. Keeping all 17 facilities active was expensive, required too many personnel, and sent the wrong message to the galaxy. We keep 9 installations operational, Jaiwan explained to Commander Dohayan, who was overseeing the decommissioning. That's enough to maintain full defensive coverage of the core human systems. The other 8 will be placed in standby mode. We can reactivate them if needed, but it will take about 3 weeks. And, if someone attacks during those 3 weeks? Dohayan asked. Then, we use the 9 active installations. They can still generate enough quantum field coverage to protect Earth, Mars, and the inner colonies. We just lose some of the redundancy and extended range. Dohayan nodded. It's a risk, but probably necessary. The galaxy needs to see that we're not planning to expand our defensive perimeter. That we're serious about this being purely defensive. The decision had been controversial. General Bora had argued for keeping the entire network active indefinitely. But Minji had been firm. Humanity needed to show restraint. They needed to demonstrate that Project Nightfall was a shield, not a sword. That they could be trusted with this power. On Unity Prime, Admiral Hyun-woo was dealing with a different kind of challenge. The solar defense fleet had become almost irrelevant overnight. Why maintain hundreds of conventional warships when you had a weapon that could erase entire fleets in seconds? We're reorganizing, he explained to a group of ship captains. The fleet stays operational, but with a new mission. We're shifting focus from direct combat to patrol, rescue, and escort duties. Think of us as the visible face of human defense. We're what the galaxy sees and interacts with. Nightfall is what they don't see unless they make a terrible mistake. Captain Youngmi was among those captains. She had returned from her stealth ship deployment and been transferred to command of a patrol cruiser. The Shadow of Terra and her sister ships were being kept in reserve, ready to deploy if needed but not actively stationed throughout the system. Do we tell civilian ships about Nightfall? One captain asked. Merchant crews, colony transports. They already know, Hyun-woo said. The president's broadcast 6 months ago told everyone. But, we don't discuss operational details. They know the weapon exists. They don't need to know where it's positioned or how it works. On Earth, Dr. Soo-hyun was training the next generation of Nightfall specialists. The program had expanded from 300 researchers to over 1,000. If something happened to the original team, humanity needed people who could maintain and operate the technology. Her assistant Hanul was giving a lecture to new recruits. The quantum field generators use principles that still aren't fully understood. We know how to make them work, but we can't explain why they work. Think of it like humanity learning to use fire before understanding combustion. It's functional knowledge without complete theoretical knowledge. One of the new recruits raised a hand. What happens if we try to improve the technology? Make it more powerful or faster to deploy? We don't, Hanul said firmly. The calculations are based on the original device we recovered. Any modifications could be catastrophic. We're talking about manipulating fundamental forces of reality. One mistake could tear a hole in space-time, create a permanent quantum instability, or do something we can't even predict. The technology works as it is. We leave it alone. The recruit looked disappointed, but nodded. Soo-hyun understood that feeling. Every scientist wanted to push boundaries, discover new things, improve on what existed. But, some technologies were too dangerous to experiment with. Better to have a reliable defensive weapon than to risk destroying what you were trying to protect. In the presidential office, Minji was meeting with emissary Vector. The Valkyrie diplomat had been on Earth for 3 months, negotiating the formal armistice. The discussions had been difficult. The Valkyrie were not accustomed to negotiating from a position of weakness. The High Council has accepted all your terms, Vector said. His 4 eyes showed something that might have been resignation. No Valkyrie ships will enter human space without explicit permission. We will establish a neutral zone between our territories. Trade will be permitted but strictly regulated. And we will release all survivors from the civilizations we have conquered over the past century. Minji raised an eyebrow at that last point. That wasn't one of our demands. No, Vector agreed. But, the High Council believes it necessary. Your demonstration of restraint after victory has affected our society. There are those among us who question whether conquest is the path our species should continue following. Releasing the conquered peoples is a gesture toward a different future. Political instability in the Dominion. Philosophical instability, Vector corrected. We are warriors. We have always been warriors. But, you defeated us without becoming like us. You built the most powerful weapon in known space and used it only in defense. Then, you immediately began reducing that weapon's active footprint. This is not how we would have behaved in your position. Minji considered that. What would the Valkyrie have done? We would have demanded tribute. Expanded our territory. Forced other species to acknowledge our supremacy. Used the weapon until every civilization in the galaxy knelt before us. Vector's voice was flat, factual. This is why some in the High Council are questioning our ways. You showed us that strength and restraint can coexist. After the emissary left, Minji sat alone in her office and thought about the weight of power. 6 months ago, she had authorized the deaths of 8 million beings. That number haunted her dreams. But, the alternative had been the enslavement of 8 billion humans. Sometimes there were no good choices. Only necessary ones. Her assistant knocked on the door. Ma'am, you have another visitor. The Centauri Trade Consortium has sent a representative. Minji sighed. The Centauri had been careful allies before the invasion, but they had withdrawn their ships when the Valkyrie arrived. Now they wanted to rebuild the relationship. 3 other civilizations had made similar requests. Everyone wanted to be friends with the species that had the ultimate defensive weapon. Send them in, she said. Over the next month, humanity signed treaties with 4 different alien civilizations. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, mutual defense pacts. The galaxy was reorganizing around the new reality. Human space was untouchable. Therefore, being allied with humans meant being protected by association. Lieutenant Yunji returned to active duty after 3 months of counseling. She had struggled with what she had done, with being the person who activated the weapon that killed 8 million beings. The military psychologists had worked with her carefully, helping her process the trauma. Now she sat at a different station on Unity Prime, monitoring sensor feeds from the outer system. Her daughter Sumi had drawn her a picture of a spaceship with a rainbow coming out of it. Yunji had it pinned to her console. Contact, one of the other officers called out. Single ship, unknown configuration, approaching from the direction of the Andromeda Relay. Admiral Hyun-woo immediately went on alert. Identify. Running scan, it's not matching any known design in our database. Hull configuration is unusual. Weapons appear minimal. Wait, we're receiving a transmission. The message was audio only, translated through algorithms that struggled with the unfamiliar language structure. Greetings to humanity. We are the Kalari Republic. We have traveled far to meet the species that possesses the ancient dimensional technology. We seek knowledge, not conflict. May we approach for peaceful contact. Hyun Woo looked at Supreme Commander Taeyang, who had the authority to make this decision. How did they know about the dimensional technology? Taeyang asked. We've been careful about what information we release. Sir, the communications officer said. They're transmitting schematics. They have drawings that match the device we recovered near Proxima Centauri. The derelict ship. They know what it looks like. Dr. Soo-hyun was called up from the lunar facility. She studied the schematics the Kalari had sent. Her hands were shaking slightly. These are more detailed than what we recovered, she said quietly. They show internal components that were too damaged in our derelict to analyze. Whoever these people are, they know more about this technology than we do. The decision was made to allow the Kalari ship to approach Earth orbit under heavy escort. When the alien ambassador finally appeared on screen, humanity got its first look at a species that might actually understand what they had found. The Kalari looked almost crystalline, their bodies refracting light in complex patterns. The ambassador spoke in careful, measured tones through the translation system. 10,000 years ago, our civilization was saved by the founders. They gave us the dimensional technology and taught us to build it. Then, they disappeared. We have searched for them across the galaxy for millennia. You have found one of their ships. You have learned to use their gift. This makes you potentially the most important discovery we have made in 1,000 years. President Minji met with the ambassador in person, in a carefully arranged meeting that took weeks to organize. Who were the founders? We do not know. They appeared when our species faced extinction from a war we could not win. They gave us the means to defend ourselves. They taught us that the ultimate purpose of power is protection, not conquest. Then, they left. We have been searching for them ever since, trying to understand why they helped us. And, now you found us using their technology. Yes. But, you discovered it independently. You learned to activate it without instruction. This suggests something about humanity that we find remarkable. The Kalari proposed an exchange. They would teach humanity more about the dimensional technology, help them understand the theoretical principles behind it. In return, they asked only for the coordinates of where the derelict was found. Another piece of the puzzle in their search for the founders. The agreement was signed. Humanity would finally understand the weapon that had saved them. 6 months became a year. The Nightfall network hummed quietly in the background of human civilization. The galaxy adjusted to a new balance of power. The Valkyrie remained peaceful, their society undergoing changes that would have seemed impossible before the 5-minute war. Other civilizations approached humanity with respect rather than condescension. Captain Youngmi stood on the observation deck of Unity Prime and watched Earth turn slowly below. Her daughter had asked her recently what she did in the military. Youngmi had smiled and told her the truth this time. I helped keep people safe. It wasn't a lie anymore. It had never been a lie, really. Just a truth she couldn't speak aloud. Now everyone knew. Humanity had the ultimate defense. They had used it once, for 5 minutes, to end a war before it could truly begin. And, they had shown the galaxy that having power didn't mean you had to abuse it. The stealth ships remained ready. The quantum generators stood silent but active. And, across human space, people went about their lives knowing that they were protected by something ancient, powerful, and completely under control. They had been given hours to fall. They had ended the war in minutes. And, in doing so, they had changed not just their own future, but the future of the entire galaxy. Power, it turned out, was less about what you could destroy and more about what you chose to protect. Humanity had learned that lesson. And, they had taught it to everyone else.